What's going on, traders? In this video, we're going to talk about nothing but earnings. We're not going to go over the triple Qs. We're not going to go over the SPY. Why are we not going to go over those things? Because earnings is going to be the reason why those things move. Simple as that. Big tech earnings is here, so that's all we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about the big names and where I think they can go. Now, keep in mind, earnings is complete lottery. It's 50-50. Do your own due diligence, do your own research. Do not take what I say at face value. I just thought this would be a fun video, so we're gonna get straight into it. Like, subscribe, comment your thoughts below. Let's get into it. All right, so first up is Microsoft, and we're picking Microsoft first because it just seems obvious. I mean, it just seems a little too obvious here. For a while now, if you've been on my channel, we've been talking about this head and shoulders pattern on the weekly. And I mean, it's still here. Okay, it's still here. You have your shoulder here, you have your head here, you have your shoulder here, and you're still fighting this resistance at around 430, 427 range. Supply and demand zone here is just really tough, and we've been sitting here for quite some time. We can even go as far as to say that there is a possible I want to say a bear flag here as well. But I mean, regardless, we've been looking at this pattern for quite some time, this head and shoulders pattern. We've been talking about this for, I want to say, almost 2 months now, and Microsoft just hasn't done anything. It's just been sitting here, consolidating back and forth, despite what the market has been doing. Microsoft just hasn't been moving. So there are fair value gaps that need to be mitigated to the downside, more so around the 380, 375 range. If you don't know, Microsoft has earnings Wednesday after hours, but there's fair value gaps towards the downside here at around the 380 range, and then you have another one all the way towards the 350s. So yeah, I would be really, really careful trading Microsoft if you're looking for upside here. Your best bet is not to play earnings at all. I mean, that's always going to be the best decision you can make. But if you're trying to live life on the edge here, then this is a play that I would lean more bearish towards. All right. Your neckline is at the around the 390 range, about 385, 390 range. So if you want to wait for the neckline break and possibly play Microsoft after earnings, this is the possible move that I would be looking for. Um, as far as upside goes, I mean, if maybe Microsoft gets above the supply and demand zone prior to its earnings on Wednesday, which I'm finding a hard time to believe, but maybe Google earnings or whatever earnings comes out tomorrow, between tomorrow morning and tomorrow's close, maybe that helps boost the market higher. But right now, Microsoft just doesn't look too bullish in regards to upside. There is a fair value gap on a daily time frame. I wouldn't say this needs to be mitigated, but I mean there is still an area right here where it kind of needs to get cleared at around 450. But again, I mean, the pattern is just too obvious. This head and shoulders is just all over the place. When I say all over the place, I mean just on multiple time frames. I mean, it's here we're on a daily time frame, and it's here as well. You can see it clear as day. We zoom out, and I mean it's right here. You have somewhat of a bear flag. You have your flagpole here. Let's mark it out. You have your flagpole here. So I mean, clean bear flag, super clean head and shoulders pattern. I might actually play this myself and alert this to the Discord because I mean, this is just I 9 times out of 10, if you gave me 10 opportunities to take this trade, I'm gonna take it 9 times. Simple as that. So this is what I would be looking for from Microsoft. I just don't see any potential for upside here. Maybe if it breaks within the supply and demand zone, maybe if it gets above it, but even then, even if it does get above the supply and demand zone right here, you're not seeing much upside. I mean, let's say it does do one of these moves, right? It just does this prior to its earnings for whatever reason. Maybe, we get good news or some good earnings plays prior to its earnings. And then it does this, but then look how much upside you really have. You're very limited. So I definitely wouldn't look to play that to the upside. That's just me. Either don't play it to the upside. Either I'm not going to play it to the upside, or I'm just not going to play it at all. But I'm definitely leaning more bearish. Again, we talked about this for so long. This head and shoulders pattern has been sitting here and just cooking for so long. And then the icing on the cake, you got this bear flag on top of that. I mean, 1 + 1 = 2 people. So I mean, you do the math. Fair value gaps to the downside, literally none to the upside on a weekly time frame. Daily time frame. I mean, if you want to take this fair value gap somewhat serious, by all means, go for it. But again, we're below the supply and demand zone. We continue to reject the supply and demand zone. Got that bear flag going. 4 hour time frame. Maybe we could find something here. Not really. I mean, yeah, you have another fair value gap, but this fair value gap has pretty much been mitigated. Let's see if we got any to the downside. Doesn't look like we have any to the downside, but yeah, I just wouldn't trust Microsoft to the upside. That's just me. Do what you want with that information. Next stock we're going to look at in regards to earnings. Actually, let's look at Bitcoin because Coin has earnings coming up. So we'll just look at Bitcoin real quick. Bitcoin has Bitcoin destroyed both sides. I mean, I'm so glad I don't trade crypto, because this is insane. It trapped the bulls Friday, I believe, and then it ended up trapping bears as well. So yeah, everybody got cooked. But right now, if you are a buyer in Bitcoin or trading Bitcoin to the upside, whatever the case may be, you are absolutely eating right now. What I will say is that upside seems a little bit limited here. There is a target that I have for 71,300. Bitcoin can absolutely see previous highs at around what was it, 74K. I definitely think that's possible. My only issue is if it does that prior to coin earnings. I don't know how that affects things. I don't really pay attention to Bitcoin and how it correlates with coin earnings. I obviously pay attention to how they correlate outside of their earnings, but I don't know like how they will move in regards to earnings. Like if coin goes crazy for its earnings, will Bitcoin go crazy as well, or does Bitcoin make the move prior to coin? So would this be this move that's happening on coin Bitcoin going up? Is this pretty much a sign that coin is going to be this earning? So I don't know the correlation between that. So feel free to to comment below or if you have an idea, but I would say right now I'm leaning bullish. I would say right now it's just hard to say considering just where we are on Bitcoin. Okay, I mean we rejected here, we rejected this area. Look how many times we rejected. I mean we rejected this area so many times, the supply and demand zone. So if we do get good earnings, I would imagine Bitcoin breaks to all-time highs. It's really tough to say. Okay, it's tough for me to say simply because I just don't know the correlation between the two in regards to earnings, and how they move with each other. Like if coin beats earnings, will Bitcoin go crazy, and or vice versa? Or does Bitcoin pretty much price in the move already? That's a better way to say it. Does Bitcoin price in the move that coin is going to have in regards to earnings? And if that's the case, then I would imagine coin is going to be earnings. If that is the case, so. I can't really say for sure if I think coin is going to be earnings. I mean, I guess we can look at coin itself and see if there's something there. But in regards to Bitcoin, guys, Bitcoin looks absolutely bullish. I think it's going to hit at least 71,300. As long as it's above 69K, I think Bitcoin is pretty much good to go. My issue with coin, and it's the same thing with coin. Right now we're at a wall, and this is the same thing I was looking at in regards to Bitcoin, where we were pretty much at that supply and demand zone. We're pretty close to that supply and demand zone. But I mean, look to the downside. We have a few fair value gaps to the downside that needs to be mitigated all the way towards the 170s on coin. And what I will say was really bugging me here is that are we pricing in because look how much we moved prior to coins earnings. Are we pricing in this data already? Are we already pricing in good earnings? And if we're leaving these fair value gaps behind, all right. So that's my only issue. Is this already being priced in? This fair value gap up here has pretty much been mitigated. I don't like how this looks, but the more safe option is to just say this has been mitigated. That's what I'm going with here. Okay, I don't really trust this right here, simply because we don't have a bullish candle leading into this. We just have we have a bullish candle that just turned completely bearish. So I'm not a fan of that. Let's go to the weekly time frame, see if we can get something out of that. Yeah, the weekly. It's just nothing here, honestly. I just don't see it. I guess we can consider this somewhat of a retest of this area here, but we broke past it, so it's really tough to say. Could this be a trap? Can't say for sure. It's really tough. You look at the 4 hour time frame, and let's actually zoom in. And again, you have these fair value gaps that need to be mitigated to the downside. So again, the overall point here is, has the earnings move been priced in already? And if so, I imagine coin is going to tank for its earnings, and then Bitcoin is going to follow along. That's my thought process on that. But right now we're at a wall, so I can't be completely bullish on coin until either Bitcoin breaks out towards newer highs, or coin breaks out of this area right here, which is pretty much this resistance right here. So that's what I have to say in regards to coin. Um, if you want, if you didn't get nothing out of that, plain and simple, above 69K, Bitcoin's bullish. Simple as that. 71,300 is my first target. After that, you're looking at a move towards 73K. And then after that, it's really tough to say until we break out of this area and get above previous highs, which is around about 74. I would say 75K as your psych level. So that's what I'm looking at in regards to Bitcoin. Pretty neutral, I would say. Um, Next stock is let's go over Apple. I wanted to save Apple for last, but man, okay. Apple looks godlike. Okay, so there's a lot of bad. So this is my thing with Apple. There's a lot of bad news coming out for Apple, like the iPhone sales and all this other stuff. Um, but I think it's a trap. I honestly do. I think it's a trap. And so what I will say in regards to Apple, if you don't know when Apple's earnings is, I believe it's Thursday. Yeah, October 31st after hours. What I will say about Apple, and this is what's really getting me with Apple right here. There's an ascending triangle right here. You have a flat top, clean as day. You rejected here. You rejected here multiple times. You attempted to reject here multiple times. Hopefully, you guys can see this. Let's zoom in a little bit, right? And then you pretty much bounced off these areas right here. I'm not going to mark every single one, but right here you bounced, and then you attempted to bounce here, you bounced here, and now you're bouncing here. So what I will say about Apple is that Apple respects patterns. That's one thing I've learned about Apple. Apple last earnings, I believe it was last Apple earnings, it had this massive cup and handle, not even a massive cup and handle. And I mean, it respected the crap out of that cup and handle. I think this was it. No, this wasn't it. Maybe the earnings prior. Yeah, right here. Cup and handle, clear as day. It probably looks better on a 4 hour time frame. All right, you guys get the idea. My Discord members know what I'm talking about. Those who were here when I was talking about it. But regardless, Apple respects patterns more than any other stock, in my opinion. And so, what I will say is that this ascending triangle, if Apple breaks out, which I imagine is probably going to happen for its earnings, it can head as high as about 260. I mean, that's pretty crazy. And so I think if any stock was going to cause all-time highs in the overall market, like get that triple Q's target that I was talking about, like 510 or anything like that. And what's ironic about it is that it's going to happen before elections. I think Apple will be the one to cause that. Absolutely. If Apple goes to 260 for its earnings, the whole market is going to go berserk. And then I think elections is going to be the thing that causes the real drop. Okay. If that happens, okay, if Apple beats its earnings, and I think that's going to be the case. There's too much bad news being pumped out for I said apples. There's too much bad news being pumped out for Apple. It's like something new every single day in regards to its iPhones. I think they're really trying their best to trap retailers and get them to get into puts. And so the move that I am looking for in regards to Apple is I would love to see Apple get below 230 again. And we can go to the 4 hour time frame. If Apple can get below 230 and really get to like 225, 226 prior to its earnings, that's an excellent opportunity. I would love that. There's a gap right here that needs to be filled at around 230, 231. And so if Apple can do one of these moves, and either way, just depending on how it looks for before earnings, I'm still probably going to jump into Apple. But I would love for this move to happen. Absolutely. Absolutely would love for that move to happen. I pretty much would try to market to go up, but it didn't happen. But you guys get the idea. So that's what I'm looking at regards to Apple. I think Apple is going to destroy its earnings. Um, I think they're going to whip out some surprise. Okay, they're going to pull down their pants and they're going to whip out a surprise for you guys because pause on me. All right, no diddy. But regardless, I think Apple's going to go crazy for its earnings. Um, that's pretty much all I have. There is a inverted hammer pattern here. Oh, there's a doji right there afterwards. Let's look at the weekly time frame. Let's see if we get something out of that. Yeah. So yeah, there's fair value gaps here. And so this is what makes it like so beautiful. This is what makes this so beautiful. If Apple does this, if Apple heads towards, let me mark this out for you guys. If Apple does one of these moves where it heads towards 250, 260 for its earnings, I think that you're loading puts like almost right away. I think you're loading puts right away, right before elections, and then boom, you start seeing this move happen. Okay. At some point in time, I think this is going to happen. These fair value gaps need to be mitigated at some point in time in the future. Um, I don't know if Apple's going to go as low as 140, but I think 170, 180, 183, 184 is definitely a buying opportunity for Apple. So that's what I would be looking for. Um, in case you don't know, this is a rising wedge pattern, absolutely bearish pattern. So that's what I'm going to be looking for in regards to Apple. I think Apple's going to beat their earnings. Um, and that's all I have for Apple. I think they're going to crush it. Next stock I'm going to be looking at is Amazon. We're actually in a trade for Amazon. We're in a leap trade for Amazon in our Discord. So I do think Amazon is going to beat their earnings. I think they're going to crush it. Amazon, ironically, I believe they have earnings the same day as Apple. So that just makes things absolutely great. What is happening here? All right, let's try this again. So Amazon. So I think Amazon's going to beat their earnings. I do. We're in a trade on Amazon. We're in a leap trade. I think Amazon's going to break past 200. My target is 210. I think it's going to do it easy. Okay, I definitely think Amazon's going to beat for their earnings. I think Apple's going to beat for earnings. They both have their earnings after hours. I think they're both going to crush it. Um, it's going to be a great day Thursday if they both beat earnings. All right. So what I'm looking for in regards to Amazon is this fair value gap up here at around. There's a fair value gap at around 192, 193 that needs to be mitigated. And then you go to the daily time frame, right? You zoom out on the daily time frame, and I mean, you just got this beautiful inverse head and shoulders patterns forming on Amazon. And so your neckline would be right about here. Okay. So if prior to Amazon's earnings, it can somehow get above at least 194, you're cooking. So if you want to wait on that type of move, then all by all means do that. If you want to get into a leap play, I think that's the more safe option because I think Amazon by next year, Amazon is definitely going to be above 200, if not sooner. But right now, this is what I'm going to be looking for Amazon prior to Thursday. Okay, and then I'll possibly add more contracts to our play and alert our Discord. So this is what I'm looking for in regards to Amazon. So I think a beautiful buying opportunity for Amazon prior to its earnings, and this is just me. Do what you want with this information. Do your own research. 184, 186, jump into some more contracts on in that area, and then boom. Okay, or your best option is to just wait for this break and retest above 194, 193 range. All right, so that's what I'm going to be looking for in regards to Amazon. I think they're going to beat their earnings. Let's go to the weekly time frame, see if I missed anything. Yeah, I mean, clear as day. I mean, look at this, clear as day. You can't you can't ask for anything better here. So I think Amazon, Apple, they're going to beat their earnings. Simple as that. Let's look at Google because Google has their earnings tomorrow after hours. I think Google's going to miss for their earnings. So it's not simply TA. I just don't think Google has anything innovative going for itself right now. Gemini, ChatGPT is just absolutely crushing Gemini. I just don't think, unless Google just whips out something that's really surprising investors, I don't think they're going to beat for their earnings. Okay. Now, what I will say is that Google has fair value gaps to both sides. Okay. So it has fair value gaps to 150, and then it has a fair value gap all the way towards 180. Yeah, about 180. And then there's this gap field that needs to be filled at 180. Now, what everyone is talking about in regards to Google, and what's interesting here, first off, let's point out this pattern right here. Um, there's a hangman pattern right here, and I know some people are going to watch this and they'll be like, hangman patterns need to be 50% wicked and all that. If it looks like the pattern, assume that it is until proven otherwise. On a daily time frame, you have a hangman pattern. Clear as day. I mean, simple as that. So this is an absolutely bearish pattern. It's probably one of the best bearish patterns out there. You can call it a hammer pattern, regardless. It's a reversal pattern. You have the same, like right here, great example. It's not exactly the same. This one's more skinnier, but regardless, boom, look what happened the next day. Okay, so that's what I'm looking for in regards to Google. Now, Everyone's talking about this inverse head and shoulders pattern. I see it. I absolutely see it. But I don't think it's going to play out the way everyone thinks. I think, and I could be wrong here. It's earnings. I'm okay with being wrong with all of these. Okay, it's earnings. Okay, I'm just doing this for fun. But regardless, you have this inverse head and shoulders pattern. I see it. It's clear as day. Okay, I'm not gonna deny this. You have a shoulder here, your shoulder here, but everyone's talking about this shoulder all the way up here, right? I don't think that's going to be the case. Simply because one, Google has broken this trend. Two, you have this hangman pattern, and three, I think Google is going to do one of these moves. I think it's going to meet with this shoulder right here instead of breaking out instead of breaking out right away. I think it's going to meet down here at around 150, 154, somewhere around there. It's going to do one of these moves, probably fill this gap right here at around 151 first. There's a gap right here, do this move, and then after its earnings, that's when I think Google's going to start recovering. And heading into Thursday and Friday. So I think what's going to happen after hours tomorrow, again, this is just speculation, it's earnings. I think what's going to happen after hours tomorrow, Google's going to tank for its earnings. It's going to meet up with this shoulder right here, and then it's going to start recovering and start heading towards that 180 target. Now, what motivates that move? Because that's a $40 move. I don't know what's going to motivate that move. If I had to guess what's going to motivate that move, it would be Apple and Amazon earnings will cause this like massive, like all-time high effect across the market. I think it's going to be absolutely crazy. This week in general is going to be crazy. So pretty bearish on Google. I think they're going to miss for their earnings. Hangman pattern, it broke trend right here. You bounced here, you bounced here. You have this fair value gap that needs to be mitigated to the downside. I think it's going to do this first. Yes, you have this inverse head and shoulders pattern, but I think the shoulder is going to meet up with what this right shoulder is going to meet up with this left shoulder or whatever. Your right, my right, whatever. But regardless, I think this shoulder is going to meet up and then you're going to have your shoulder here. And then that's when you start to break out. Okay. And then I think you're going to start heading towards that 180 target. Now, another scenario is obviously, you just break out and you head towards 180. If it does do that, I don't think we'll talk about that after earnings. Okay, we'll talk about it. Okay, after earnings, if it does just so happen to do that. Okay, but yes, I see this inverse head and shoulders pattern. I'm not gonna act like it doesn't exist. I'm not gonna like play around with it or anything like that. I definitely think it's there. I definitely see it's there, but I don't think Google's going to play out the way everyone think it is. That's just me. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. By all means, play how you want. And if you do win, congratulations. Meta. So Meta's tricky. Well, we talked about this in the last video. I think Meta was like the only earnings I talked about last video. Yeah, I think it was. Wait a minute, hold on. All right, so Meta's tricky here. Really, really tricky. So Meta has earnings, I believe, tomorrow after hours or no, Wednesday after hours. So what I think Meta is going to do, I think Meta's going to beat, first off. I do. I think Meta's going to beat for its earnings. But the only way I think Meta is going to beat for its earnings is if it dives prior to its earnings. So if it takes a dip before its earnings towards at least 560, 550, somewhere around there, I think it's going to beat. I think it's going to be an easy beat. All right. So this is the move that I'm expecting for Meta. It just keeps leaving gaps to the downside. That's what I'm not liking. It's leaving these gaps. It's leaving this gap here. And then this rising, not a rising wedge, but a broadening wedge. I guess you can call it a rising wedge. They all don't have to be triangle shape, but I just call it a broadening wedge. Regardless, you have this gap. It just keeps leaving gaps, and I'm not liking that. If you're bullish, I wouldn't like that. And so if it fills these gaps like right away and heads towards at least 560 without breaking this pattern at all, I think Meta's going to crush their earnings. I think they're just going to head towards like 630, 625, somewhere around there. But if Meta just pumps into his earnings, then I think they're going to miss. Okay. Um, it's 2 days to pump. I think Meta can absolutely pump into his earnings. That's very much possible. But I definitely think if Meta does one of these moves prior to his earnings, I think it's going to miss. If it does this, and hits like about 620, 630, 630. I don't know what will motivate this move, but if it just so happened to get this move out the way, then I think they're going to miss. But right now, I'm leaning towards some downside first, and then Meta destroys their earnings. That's what I'm hoping for. Okay, this is the move I'm hoping for, where it just does one of these, kind of like acts like it's going to pretty much break down, trap bears right here hit this support level at around 545, 550, and just trap everybody, and then does one of these moves. That would be beautiful. That would be. I would love that. Okay, I would be if this downward move happens prior to its earnings. Sign me up. I'm jumping in. Okay, I'm definitely jumping in. So we went over Apple, Google, Meta earnings, Coin. Um, I guess we can go over Nvidia, even though their earnings is like all the way in November, because they want to be cooler than everybody. So right now, Nvidia is breaking below its rising wedge. I just have a target of 137, so it's not nothing crazy or anything like that. I just think it's going to hit 137 and then probably recover. I still think Nvidia is going to head towards 150. It's just a matter of how it's going to get there. I have no clue how it's going to get there. Maybe it just rolls back into the pattern afterwards. So if Nvidia does like one of these moves, just hits 137 and just rolls back in the pattern. It's very possible. But I still think Nvidia is going to head towards 150. I just can't see how it's going to get there right now. But sometime short term, I definitely think it's possible. So that's really all I have for Nvidia. Right now, it just looks pretty bearish. But in regards to a bearish move, it doesn't look like anything too crazy. I didn't mean to do that. It doesn't look like anything too crazy. Just a move to 137. 135 possibly being the lowest. There is a gap right here at around 135. So yeah, that is very much possible. But right now, not looking too bad in regards to Nvidia. And that's pretty much all I have for this video. So hopefully you guys enjoyed it. Hopefully you got something out of it. Earnings is 50-50. It's a complete gamble. Don't take anything I say at face value. Always do your own due diligence, do your own research. And if you disagree, feel free to let me know in the comments below. I might just play earnings based off what you say, okay? If it makes sense, okay? But regardless, Discord link is in the description below if you want to see how we're going to play earnings. We do have like a lottery tab where we pretty much play little earnings plays. So far, we're like we we hit Tesla earnings last week. We hit WDC earnings, and then we missed on DXCM earnings. So we were 2 for 1 in regards to earnings. Last week, let's see if we can get like a 5-0 run. We're not gonna play every single earning, but we'll play the ones that I'm most confident in. So that's all I have for this video. Like, subscribe, comment your thoughts below, and until the next video, traders, have a good one.